hello and a very warm welcome to Ask the Leader. We're putting the leaders of the SNP, the Conservatives, Labour and the Liberal Democrats on the spot all throughout this week. They're each facing questions from a live studio audience here in Glasgow, and I'm going to try and press them all for the answers. If you'd like to join in our debate on social media, the hashtag to use is Ask the Leader. Earlier in the week we heard from Willie Rennie and from Kezia Dugdale, and we're going to speak to Nicola Sturgeon tomorrow night. But tonight it's the turn of Ruth Davidson, leader of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party. And the first question for her comes from Susan Kelso. Susan.
Thank you. Hi, Ruth. I am worried about the Brexit negotiations. This week we have seen Theresa May crumble in the face of questions from members of the public and journalists. How is she going to be able to stand up to the remaining EU countries when she can't even stand up to Jeremy Paxman?
Well, I think you heard today from Theresa May. She made a big speech on Brexit. She's talked the country through the issues that she wants to raise as we go forward. She's talked about her priorities for Brexit, the way in which we want to approach the negotiations, so things like ensuring that we get the right deal on cooperation for crime and security, making sure that we not only secure the rights of EU nationals here, but are able to secure the rights of Brits living abroad, to make sure that we get a comprehensive free trade deal so that we're still able to trade freely in a wider trade union. And these are things that I think the whole country can get behind. But I don't doubt that there's going to be challenges. You know, this is a case of making sure we have the right person at the table. Now, I'm not sure what Jeremy Corbyn's priorities for Brexit are. I don't think he has laid out to the country in the same way that the Prime Minister has. But that's a decision that the country is going to have to make. I've seen Theresa May work. I've seen her, you know, the application that she puts in, the hard work that she does, the diligence that she has, you know, in Number 10. And I think that she will absolutely rise to the challenge.
But the phrase she keeps using in this campaign is that she offers strong and stable leadership. Was it strong not to turn up to the BBC debate?
Well, I think there's only been... 2010 was the only leaders' debate that UK-wide there's ever been that's actually had both. So it's not like it's a convention. And then Prime Minister David Cameron took part. But he didn't do it in 2015, for example. So there's only ever been one that's happened. But I think if you're looking at an example where you can contrast the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May, then actually I think it's a really good Scottish example. When Nicola Sturgeon was saying that she was demanding a second independence referendum, you had Theresa May that laid out her reasons very clearly that now was not the time. You had to be able to see what the two options looked like, nor could you be dragged back there when the country didn't want it.
Okay, but
and Jeremy Corbyn, no, let me show the contrast, because you're asking me to talk about potential leaders leading the country.
I asked her about turning up to a debate, but let me ask you a follow-up. I'm sure you'll get the chance to make your point.
Jeremy Corbyn did say that he would be absolutely fine with a second independence referendum, and he also said this week that he would negotiate with Nicola Sturgeon about it. Now, there is an example of strong and stable leadership from Theresa May, but not from Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, is it an example of strong and stable leadership for Theresa May to backtrack on her plans to make changes to national insurance contributions in the last budget?
Well, I think we want to make sure that we've got the right deal for the country. We want to ensure that we've got an income that can support our public services, but we also don't want to hamper business organisations.
OK, but was it an example of strong and stable leadership for Theresa May to reverse her proposals in the manifesto on social care?
No, they're not being reversed. This is about making sure that in the English system, and it's a separate system in Scotland, that there is the long-term challenge of care is addressed. And, you know, these are difficult decisions, really complex issues. She wants to make sure that there's £100,000 of your wealth is maintained while you're having residential care. Actually, in Scotland, it's only £26,500. So there is a disparity across the border there. But it's about... I mean, these are tough questions. And government is about tough questions. But she's grasping the nettle of these tough questions.
Do you think she's a wobbler?
It's not about... No, absolutely not. And she certainly hasn't been when it's come to independence.
Let's go back to the question on that. What's your own view?
My concern is that Theresa May is very good at sound bites and standing up at a podium and reading a rehearsed script. But when she's questioned on that, she crumbles and she comes over as weak and wobbly. And that's my concern when she's facing the EU countries.
Well, I think there's a question about what you want in a Prime Minister. And if you want a reality TV star, then look to America, because that's what you've got in Donald Trump.
I want someone
but if you want a serious
person
of government...
for them.
Well, no, absolutely. But if you want a serious person of government, you've got one of the longest-serving Home Secretaries on record who's faced down terror threats in this country and has done again just in the last...
to journalists' questions. She crumbles.
Well, I don't believe that that's the case. But
all right. Well, the one thing that she has said is that she wants this election to have her own mandate, a stronger mandate, and that somehow that will strengthen her hand in the Brexit negotiations. How?
Well, she's going to have to sit across the table from 27 other leaders, and she's going to ask the country to come behind her. Now, how do you demonstrate that to people abroad? If you've won an election, then that's how you demonstrate that the country is behind you.
But if she wins, no matter how big her mandate, she's still going to be the Prime Minister of one country against 27. That doesn't change a thing, does it?
No, but you saw before the general election was called, you had other leaders, including Nicola Sturgeon on social media, in fact, saying that she had no mandate at all, that she didn't speak for Britain. Now, people abroad can see that. They can see what other people within the political sphere in the UK are saying about the Prime Minister of the UK, the Prime Minister of the UK, who's going to have to try and get the best deal for this country. I think that if she is being challenged to have a mandate, and that challenge is made public, then, she's right to go and get it.
OK, last one on this. If she offers such strong and stable leadership, why does it appear that Labour is narrowing the gap in the UK-wide opinion polls?
Well, look, if you look at the opinion polls, and I'm not sure after 2015 or Brexit or the American elections we should trust necessarily the opinion polls, but if you look at what's there, the biggest landslide in my political lifetime was Tony Blair in 1997, and he got 43% of the vote. The UK Conservative Party is currently polling 45% of the vote, which is even higher than the 97 landslide. Now, yes, absolutely.
You don't think Labour is closing the gap?
No, Jeremy Corbyn is creeping up. I think we've seen a fairly disastrous Lib Dem campaign. But, this is a question, and polls quite often narrow before the vote. OK, I
want to bring in more voices from our audience on this. The lady in the middle with the blue top, yeah.
Hi Ruth, just following what you said about Jeremy Corbyn, he's not really putting out a case, but I think, at least he showed up last night and addressed the nation on how he was going to be that strong and stable leader.
Okay. And the young man in the back.
It's humiliating that she tweeted her answer to that question and she wasn't there to answer.
I take that as a point. The gentleman in the back, yeah.
When it comes to talking about Brexit, you say we need a free trade agreement. Now, it took Canada 7 years. As of today, we have 666 days to leave the European Union. Any trade deal, there won't be a deal once we leave. It will cost households £1,700. Brexit's going to be a disaster, and Theresa May's not the person to be at the helm of that ship.
I think the difference between us and other countries is that we have already been within the European Union, so we already comply to all of the regulations, all of the other things that need to be worked out with a free trade agreement and some of the elements that have to be decided upon. So we already comply with so much of this. So in terms, we're starting further ahead in the grid, if you like, than another country like, say, Canada would.
When you were campaigning for Remain in the EU referendum, and you were one of the leading campaigners for the Remain side, you said that Brexit would result in the UK crashing the economy. When did you change your mind?
Well, I think that if we don't get a good deal, and it could be very challenging, that's why I'm so supportive to make sure we have the right people that are leading the country, and in my view,
but you didn't say that then.
May.
You just said Brexit would mean that we would crash our economy.
Well, I think that there are huge challenges. That's why I want to ensure...
Have you changed your mind about that, or are you still pretty worried?
Well, no. I would still vote Remain tomorrow if the question was asked. I did campaign for Remain, but the difference is, and this is something that I think is almost probably more potent in Scotland than it is anywhere else, is that if you, as a politician, say that there is a massive decision that the country has to make, and it's so big, it has to be taken out of the hands of politicians in Parliament, and it's got to be made by the country as a whole, then to just turn around and say, well, I didn't like that result, let's redo the election again and again and again, the referendum again and again, then I don't think that when I say that we shouldn't do that in Scottish independence, I have the right to say that we should do that for Brexit either. So my job now is to make sure that I try and get the best deal for the whole country, including Scotland, because that's the decision that 17.5 million people, including 1 million in Scotland, made just last year.
OK, let's take a look at something you said in the immediate aftermath of the EU referendum about the sort of deal that you thought we should get.
So you would like to stay in the single market?
I want to stay in the single market, yeah.
And you would like, even if a consequence of that is maintaining free movement of labour?
Even if a consequence of that is maintaining free movement of labour, yes.
When did you change your mind on that?
Well, the reason that I campaign for Remain, the reason that I believe in free markets, I'm a centre-right politician. I want Scottish businesses to be able to trade freely across the continent.
But you're no longer arguing that you want to be in the single market.
If I was just explaining it, if you'll let me just carry on just a second to explain why I'm saying that. And now, the system that we had, the system that I was campaigning for within Remain, was that we stayed within the way in which we were allowed to do that. So the framework was the single market. Now, the Prime Minister says that as we leave, and that was a decision that was taken by the entire country, not just politicians, that as we leave, she wants to ensure that we still have the ability to trade freely across the continent, but we do that through a comprehensive free trade agreement. Now, we can quibble about the framework, but if it still allows Scottish businesses to trade freely across the continent, then of course I support that.
You said that you would be prepared to accept the free movement of people, but your party has rejected that as a core principle of the Brexit negotiations.
Well, because they decided or agreed that that was one of the things that the people rejected in the vote itself.
Well, did they? That wasn't on the ballot paper, was it?
Well, being part of the European Union, that was one of the integral 4 parts of being part of the European Union.
Yet within days of the referendum result to leave, you were still talking up the possibility of staying in the single market and retaining free movement.
What I was being asked was what my position was. Now, of course, I believed in those things because that's what I voted for just a few days before that was filmed.
OK, let's bring in the audience in this. The lady in the front row with the glasses and then the gentleman in the back row.
Ruth, you talk about Theresa May's Brexit priorities. Why has it not been a priority to guarantee the rights of EU nationals to stay here? Shouldn't people be a priority?
OK, briefly on that, and then I'll bring in the gentleman in the back.
Well, no, absolutely. And she made an approach to other EU leaders to ask if we could do this before Article 30 was moved and before we got into the negotiation process. And she was rejected in that request because she's right to say that we need to get this sorted first and foremost, but she's also right to make sure that the millions of British people that are living abroad also have security that's given to them, as well as making sure we get security to EU nationals here.
OK, she could have taken the lead, though, and she could have made that up.
But she did. She asked for this to...
But she could have just said that the UK were guaranteeing the rights of EU nationals as a challenge to the other EU countries to do the same for Brits abroad.
But as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, she also has a responsibility to Brits that live elsewhere.
OK, let me bring in the gentleman in the back row.
What do you think about our stance to only involve a handful of cabinet ministers in the whole decision-making process? Why isn't it going back to Parliament?
Well, I think we've already agreed that it will go back to Parliament. And also in terms of having a negotiating team, people have got their different tasks. But don't think for 1 second that in the last year there haven't been unbelievable amounts of meetings with ministers, officials, advisers, with all of the different interest groups, individual sectors, with unions, with others, about what it is that they want that's coming out. And one of the things that I found quite surprising, because I was quite emotional about the EU result last year, was within days of it, the amount of people that were chapping at my door with a wholly rational rather than emotional response, saying, look, this is what my company, or this is what my sector, or this is what my area of expertise is worried about when we leave, so this is what we've got to get right, or this is what I've always hated about the European Union. If we're coming out, can we change this? So whether that was the Fishermen's Federations, whether that was the NFU Scotland, whether that was the financial services sector, and they all wanted to make sure that I fed that in, they wanted to make sure that they could get meetings, and these meetings have been going on all the year to make sure that as the government, they understand not just what organisations in Scotland want, but people right across the UK want too.
OK, I'm going to move on to another topic as we're rapidly getting through our time. This question comes from Jane Reid. It's been submitted from home, and she asks, where do you stand on the triple lock for pensioners?
Well, the triple lock was brought in, if folk remember, because under the last government there was quite a lot of very small rises in the pension, so way below inflation. 1 year it was only 10 pence per week. And
I suppose I should explain what the mechanism does. It means that pensions, the state pension is uprated by either
inflation, wages, or 2.5%, whichever is the highest. And the reason that was brought in was to bring it back up to where the pension had dropped down. Now, the party is going to guarantee that the triple lock stays till 2020, and then after that it will be a double lock, so it will rise either with wages or inflation, whichever is highest. So once we've self-righted, which is what we're trying to do, it will never drop below that again.
But it's likely, is it not, that over time that will slow the pace at which pensions increase?
Well, that depends very much on inflation or wages, but what it means is...
Well, it's going to take money away from pensioners.
Well, no, it will go up every single year, and it won't be going up by 10 pence every year like we saw under Gordon Brown. It will be continuing to be significant rises every single year. The amount of pensioners we've taken out of poverty...
There wouldn't be a guaranteed rise, would there, if there was no inflation and if earnings weren't rising? There would be no rise in the pension, would there?
Well, can you point me to a time at all where that has never happened, Glenn?
Well,
we're talking about practicalities here.
Well, so you are confident that it will continue to rise, but the research into this between 2010 and the present suggests that had we not had the triple lock, the 2.5% guarantee...
Which the Conservatives brought in and every other party voted against in every budget that we had.
Well, they all seem to be supporting it at this election.
Despite voting against it every time we put it through a budget, yes.
Well, the research, I think, carried out by The Telegraph, which is a Conservative-supporting newspaper, suggests that the pension would be worth £107 less if the 2.5% part of the triple lock hadn't been applied.
Well, and that's why we made sure that we made it rise above earnings and above inflation to bring it back to where it should be, and it will continue until 2020, and then it will never fall below that level again.
OK, let's take another question. Jonathan Bryson.
Ruth,
hello.
I just want to know what the Tories will do to demonstrate that they will value disabled people again in the future.
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do, and in the last general election, we said that we wanted to have the disability employment gap, because we know that there's barriers to people getting into employment that seek to have it. We've also changed DLA onto PLP, so that's Disability Living Allowance. More people are on the higher level of PIP. One of the reasons for that...
Personal independence
personal independence payments. And one of the reasons for that was to try and make sure that we had parity of esteem between people who had mental health issues and physical health issues, but both of which impact on their ability in the workplace and perhaps weren't able to get into work. So these are changes that we've made. And I think what's important as well is one of the things that we're doing now, and I think this is such a good idea, and I wish we'd done it sooner actually, and I wish it had occurred to people to do it sooner, is we're putting more work coaches into job centres to help with some of the specific issues that people on disabilities have, because we know, and they will help in terms of CV writing and core skills and training and helping get a job, but they also should be able to help employers to feel as if they are confident enough to take on disabled staff, because we know that sometimes the difficulty is actually at the employer end rather than the ability of the person that's presenting for interview. So these are things that we're trying to do.
Your manifesto talks about getting a million more disabled people into work over a period of time, but what's your own experience?
Well, I have a good experience in terms of work, etc., but I just feel that the sentiment that is around since 2010 is bad. When you have messages from the budget where George Osborne said we're going to cut taxes for the top and then cut benefits, just does not give a message that you value disabled people. It gives a message... It gives a message that the strong in society get spoils and those who are vulnerable are left to themselves. And I think that is deplorable. Now, George Osborne may have gone, but I feel that that sentiment still exists. When one of May's special advisors says, well, we're going to target the most needy disabled, that doesn't make disabled people feel better. You have outlined some very interesting micro policies, but there has to be a message coming back to disabled people saying, we value you. There is 13 million people, according to Scope, who are disabled in this country. Only 11 million, or between 11 million and 12 million people voted Tory in the last election. So why aren't you saying, come on, disabled people, vote for us? That's something for all parties, I have to say.
Let Ruth Davidson answer that.
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're wanting a big message, my big message is I want to see the ability, not the disability. And that's one of the reasons why I think enabling people who are able to work and want to work and find that there's barriers on their route into work.
But do you understand why Jonathan and others with disabilities feel that they're being penalised when benefits are being taken away?
Well, actually, in terms of disability benefit, the movement to PIP actually means more people are on the higher rate. And I know that when you talk about statistics, it doesn't relate to people's own lives, and so it seems difficult to be able to do that. But one of the things that we're trying to do is to make sure that it is a more responsive benefit that does help people. And also it's about making sure that people have the help that they need, rather than the fact that they're left. Because we don't want people to be left behind. We want them to come on that journey.
Well, that is fair. But when you have a situation where policy advisors, as I say we're going to only help the most needy disabled, and you actually, in the same statement in front of Parliament, have a Chancellor who says we are going to cut taxes at the top and then leave the vulnerable with less, then I find that difficult to deal with.
Jonathan, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. I know that others want to come in on this, so the gentleman in the middle with the baseball cap. On back to front.
You've just said that you're going to introduce coaches into job centres. Is this the same job centres that you guys are closing down all over the city?
Okay, and the lady over here, yeah.
I would just like to ask Ruth, if your party does get into government, if you would make, give better training to PIP assessors. I myself have been for a PIP assessment for a hidden disability and a mental health issue, and I was declined on the basis I didn't look as if I had a mental health issue. So I don't know if you can maybe foresee how that would come across to someone.
Tell us a little bit more about that. What happened?
I was referred by 2 of my medical professionals. I had chosen myself to come off of disability living allowance because I felt my hidden disability was well controlled and I wasn't allowed to make that choice myself.
Are you able to say more about that?
Yes, I'm epileptic and it's very well controlled thanks to the NHS, although very underfunded as well with that at the moment. But when I went to my assessment, it was for the mental health issues that had come from it, and I was told that in my letter, unfortunately, you don't look as if I looked in perfect health, therefore I didn't qualify for any benefits. So
and what impact did that have on you?
What was I put in an appeal not on the basis for extra funding. I wanted an appeal to have people educated. I myself found that very difficult, and I can only imagine how difficult that would be for someone who potentially has a much harder time coping. I mean, I'm in full-time work and things, but it was an absolutely horrific letter to receive because mental health and hidden disabilities are not visible for that reason.
Is that how it's meant to work?
No, it's absolutely not meant to work, and I'm happy when we come off air to take your details and take it up with that case up with the DUP, because it shouldn't work like that. We want to try and get it right for everybody. Now, we inherited a system that didn't work well. We've done a number of revisions. We have done retraining, and particularly with reassessments, we make sure it's medical staff that are doing it. It shouldn't be about, as you know, there are questions about abilities rather than about looking at a person. That's absolutely not how it's meant to work. And if that's how it has happened in your case, I will definitely take that up for the DWP with you.
It's a number system. I mean, I was told my numbers didn't add up, and that was it. I just feel it's not the personal approach that the government are putting it out there as being, it's more personal, it's more tailored to you.
Yeah,
but it doesn't we've done.
I think I'll try and get the numbers right on this. I think it's either 4 or 5 revisions since we came into the system that we inherited to try and get it better every time. Now, I absolutely accept that it's not perfect. There may not be a perfect system out there. I don't know if there's a perfect system anywhere in the world, but we want to try and get it right for individual people. And it sounds like in your case you were very badly let down, and I'm absolutely happy to take that case up for you.
All right. I want to bring in another question because time is moving on quickly. Our next question comes from Kelly Given. Kelly.
Ruth, politics aside, do you specifically as a woman truly believe in the rape clause and what it represents for our most vulnerable women? OK,
now I should just take a moment to explain what we mean when we talk about the rape clause. There is a policy which limits child tax credit claims to the first 2 children, and there are exemptions to that policy, including for multiple births and including for women who have a 3rd child as a result of rape. Ruth Davidson.
The rape clause is about giving women who've been raped extra help, and I believe that women who have been raped do deserve extra help. There is a big debate that we can have, as Glenn said, about should we have limited or unlimited benefits. But if there is a limit in place, then I think in exceptional cases there should be exceptions. Now, I've said in the past, when people have challenged about the way in which it's carried out, the way it's brought forward is it's supposed to be the way in which you qualify for this extra help is to have third-party professionals fill out the form for you. Now, that's a system that currently works for people that have been victims of domestic violence, and it has cross-party support, and that was the best model that we could see to work in this area. If, as this rolls out, and it's just coming in now, if, as this rolls out, it doesn't work well for the women involved, then we absolutely can look at that again. But in terms of,
if it doesn't work well for the women involved, what do you imagine it feels like for somebody who has been raped and has had a child as a result of rape to have to relive their horrific experience, albeit through a third party, just to claim a few quid in state benefits?
Well, I think it's very difficult. I think it's very difficult when you've got to fill out, when you're asked to fill out some of the criminal compensation forms, which women who've been subject to rape already have to do. One of the reasons that we've asked third-party professionals to help fill it out is so that they don't have to, go through the details. We're also making sure that there's no evidence, there's no proof,
you don't
there's
look
no
comfortable
anything.
at all defending this.
I think rape's a very difficult thing to talk about. I find it very difficult when people walk through my door in my surgeries who've been subject to physical violence. I don't think there's any woman in this audience or elsewhere that either hasn't been or doesn't know somebody very close to them who has been subject to sexual violence at some point in their lives. And yes, I absolutely accept that this is a difficult thing to talk about.
Come back to the question.
So if you think it's a difficult thing to talk about, why are you making women talk about their painful experiences?
Well, that's why they themselves don't have to fill out the form. That's why it's for other people to do it. They don't have to bring forward evidence. They don't have to bring forward a crime report number. They don't have to bring forward any supporting convictions or anything like that. It's just about making sure that if they want extra financial support, it's there for them.
But do you not think it's going to be more of a deterrent? Because I know that, I mean, I've personally not experienced anything like that, but if I had, I'd imagine that being faced with the choice, if I was to have to fill out an 8-page form or if I was to just walk away without the few extra quid, I would probably do that. So could one not argue that this is more of a money-saving technique than actually a technique
to put
help
people
women?
off from making the claim?
Well, no, absolutely not. I mean, there is a limit on child tax credits. It's set at 2 children, and there's a debate that rages about whether you should have unlimited benefits or limited benefits. I absolutely accept that. But if there are limits, there should be exemptions when there are exceptional cases. And like I say, if there's a way of doing it better, then I want to hear it.
Okay.
But I do think that women who have had children in the worst of circumstances,
But, I mean,
if they want extra help, it should be there for them.
If there's another way of doing it, you either are making people answer the question, asking them about their personal experience, or you don't.
Well, if there is a limit and somebody comes forward who's had a child in a child of multiple birth, or whether it's one of the other exemptions, whether it's a child of rape, and that limit is there, there's got to be a way to know.
So maybe the underlying policy is wrong.
Well, again, that's a question coming back to, do you have a system of limited benefits or unlimited benefits? And that's a whole different debate, which I'm happy to have.
OK, well, let's see where the audience want to take this. A lot of hands up. Gentlemen in the back row, first of all.
Sure. I don't think we should be too political about this, but I mean, I've had, I'm not myself experienced anything like this, but I do have friends that I know has experienced sexual assault and rape, and at least one of my friends that I was talking to, very confidential, I won't say any names or anything, they said they would never want to say, they didn't want to come forward at all, because to talk to someone about this would be to relive something for her which is really, really horrific. So that puts someone who's in that position in either the choice of having to relive something, go either whether it's a professional or otherwise, or to go with poverty because they can't afford to have the child benefit for the child. That's just a morally appalling policy. Okay. And I don't think you should defend it, Ruth. I think you should just say no.
A brief final comment on that, and then I'm going to move on.
Well, look, I mean, like I say, I have people that come through my doors. I don't know any MSP that doesn't. And you're right, some women do want to go down a criminal justice route. Some women don't. Some women want to know what is available to them, and we will help them in any way that we can. But there is a limit on this particular benefit at the moment, and if people want extra help, then I think it should be available for them. Thanks
very much indeed. We're into our final minute or so. We're going to take a very brief question from Cameron Moughlan. Cameron.
Why is it acceptable for the UK government to continue to block 16 and 17-year-olds from voting when they've proved their maturity with the Scottish election and the local elections?
Yep, well, that's one where I'm losing. Yep, that's one where I'm losing. I've lobbied my colleagues. I've written in internal pamphlets. I've lobbied them in public. I was sceptical, and then the Scottish referendum happened, and I'm a complete convert. I think some of the work that I and others have done in schools, some of the debates I've held in schools... You're not able
to persuade Theresa May to do one of her famous U-turns?
I'm working on it. Watch this space.
Thank you very much indeed. Amazingly, we're at the end of our time already. The half hour has just flown past, but thank you very much indeed to Ruth Davidson for being here. Thanks to you all for your questions and comments, and just to say that the fourth and final Ask the Leader will be on BBC One Scotland after Reporting Scotland at 7 tomorrow night with Nicola Sturgeon. But from everybody here this evening in Glasgow, thanks for watching. Good night.